The husband and wife team, Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Wu Dunn, who wrote the #1 New York Times bestseller, Half Sky, have come out with a new book entitled A Path Appears. It is a collection of stories about real people who made a huge difference in the world by transforming lives and creating opportunities, especially people working for infants, make sure they're getting the right nourishment, those working with gang violence, and people working in inner city schools and the like. What interests me in this book is their research concerning what happens in the brain when people help others by donating to a good cause. The authors argue that helping others makes us happy and ever leaves us healthier and able to live a long lives. They write about giving as a natural high and studying brain scans, for example, how the brain lights up when people give and reach out and help, that sort of thing, just as much as the brain lights up when people see the joy of a sunset, for example, or celebrate an anniversary, or experience a good meal and the like. They make the linkage between giving and happiness. Well, today, on the solemnity of Christ the King, in the gospel we find the only description of the Last Judgment in the entire New Testament. And the fact that the evangelist Matthew places this Last Judgment scene at the very conclusion or the culmination of Jesus' public teaching tells us how important this gospel narrative is. Now, the separation of the sheep and shepherds was a familiar image among the listeners of Jesus in that Eastern Mediterranean culture. And we have to remember here he's talking about a shepherd king, which is a very biblical image relating back to David, the greatest king of Israel, a shepherd king. And not some kind of a distant king on a throne, but a king who has a relationship with his people. The kind of king that was prophesied by Ezekiel in that first reading, that the shepherd would give his own heart. He would give his very self for his sheep. And we think about that famous story in John's Gospel about the Good Shepherd and how the shepherd and the sheep know each other's voices. They know who to follow. Well, I learned that at daytime, the shepherd sends the sheep and goats out to the hillside and they graze together. But at night, because the goats have a thinner coat of wool, they don't have the same kind of protection that the sheep have when it comes to a woolen coat. They have to be put into some kind of protection, maybe the shelter of a cave and so on. But the sheep, because they have such a rich, abundant coat of wool, they could stand out all night and stay out all night, and it would not hurt them. These people called sheep in the story, who are brought into the kingdom, symbolize for the Palestinian culture honor, virility, strength. And notice there's nothing really religious about them. It does not say that they believed in anything. In fact, it does not say that they did these so-called corporal works of mercy for a religious motive. As a matter of fact, they are surprised when the king says, "Whatever you did for the least of these, you did it for me." They're surprised. And that's why they ask, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, And when did we see you thirsty and give you a drink? Or when did we see you naked and clothe you and in prison and visited you? They didn't know they were doing it for God. They were just doing it out of the goodness of their hearts and were surprised to find out that it was for God himself. Now, those on the left symbolize the goats: shameful behavior, dishonor, lascivious behavior. And you would think that the king would say to them, "Get out of my sight, you cursed ones, because you lied, you slandered, you stole," that sort of thing. But we are not told that those on the left did one wicked thing. But we are told that they are people who never got around to do good things, and that is not the same. It's interesting that in the only description of the Last Judgment in the entire New Testament, the only sins that are highlighted are not sins of commission, but sins of omission. And so the point is driven home. 4 times there's this same scenario about feeding the hungry and so on in the gospel. The idea is, do you get it? Do you get it? Not doing what you were called to do. You didn't extend hospitality to others. Maybe these are the same people Jesus alluded to when, at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, he said, "It's not those who say to me, 'Lord, Lord,' who will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my heavenly Father." And what is the will of my heavenly Father? Deeds of love, hospitality, quality presence for those with whom you live, a helping hand by way of a simple kindness and smile, a lifestyle based on the gratefulness we feel for all that God has given to us. If you don't do these simple actions, according to Jesus, according to Matthew, you can't mouth, "Lord, Lord." You can mouth, "Lord, Lord," all you want. It is not lip service that matters. It is action. It is what you do. So back to the book. A path appears. Jesus says it is better to give than to receive. Now, the ongoing research of New World Science tells us that these so-called corporal works of mercy are not simply religious precepts, but a self-help route to greater happiness and wholeness. One New World scientist says, the most selfish thing we can do is to help other people. Give, and you will be healthier and live longer, and life will be more fulfilling and happy. Matthew's golden rule: it is not enough just to avoid bad things. One must do good things.